Our speaker today is Sonia Granados. She is a retired federal investigator with over 22 years experience with the United States Department of Labor, Wage, and Hour Division. Sonia administered and enforced a number of federal laws which set basic labor standards. Among them are the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Family Medical Leave Act, government contracts and prevailing wage, garnishment provisions of the Consumer Credit Protection Act, the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act, the Field Sanitation Standards of Occupational Safety and Health Act, the Employee Polygraph Protection Act, and certain employment standards and worker protections under Immigration and Nationality Act, and a lot more. It's impressive. It is extremely impressive. Sonia graduated from Webster University with a Master in Arts in Human Resource Development and Management. She is bilingual, fluent in English and Spanish, and in her off time she enjoys scuba diving, motorcycle riding, hiking, fishing, kayaking, and spending time with her two loyal canine companions. So there's a lot to offer there, and I'd like to invite her to the podium.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming. Does everyone have an agenda?
Yep.
You do have it? Do you have one? No. We appreciate, these are all the cards that I brought with me, so we can share, pass that with you. I will say to you, to everyone here, if you're still in the workforce, make sure you keep that in your wallet, because trust me, you might need it, okay? If for some rhyme or reason, after the presentation, you would like to go ahead and you have an individual question that you would want to go ahead and address with me, by all means, you could either email me or call me. I always welcome anything. Please keep in mind that my presentation is not just necessarily limited to you folks. It would be also for anybody that you might know, a family member, someone that, you know, neighbor or whatever. I always believe that, you know, knowledge is power, and if you get to know, you know, the information here that I'm going to present to you today, then in essence, you know, it will make you more powerful, I guess. Okay, again, my name is Sonia Granados, okay, and as the introduction said, I would like to kind of tell you a little bit more about myself, give you an introduction about my background. First and foremost, I opened up my business, HRC Consultants, LLC. I have my business in Maryland Heights. I am the business. And today, my loyal companion over here, my best friend, she decided that she's going to help me today with this. She's like my remote control. So that's good. Okay. Anyway, I would like to try to keep this light. Okay. So the way that I do presentations, I like the people to be engaged. If you have a question, if you have a comment, if you don't understand something, if you want to explain something a little bit more, by all means, okay? I believe in interactive presentations. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. My background is I'm Hispanic, obviously. And I was brought up speaking Spanish. Didn't learn how to speak English till I was in 3rd grade. I'm the first of my generation. I'm second generation American. My parents were born in Mexico, and they came to the United States, and they were immigrants in the United States, and I was born in Chicago. I was second generation American, I turned around and I'm the first to graduate with a master's degree from that immediate generation, shall I say. And thank you very much, I appreciate it. All right, so I started working my federal career. First and foremost, I worked with the federal government my entire professional life, okay? 37 plus years. I was a contraband enforcement agent with the U.S. Customs Service Legacy. This is before 9/11. Okay, so I worked in the southern border. I worked in Miami, but my home base was here in St. Louis. From that, yes, ma'am.
What was the first job with the federal government that you
That's
had?
one.
That was the first?
That's
Okay.
my first one. Fresh out of college, here's a gun. Go get the bad people. And I tell you something, it was great because you know what? It was like Christmas every single day. I get to tear into everybody's luggage and see what all they got in there and everything. I will share this with you. My worst, most memorable experience. There's a lot of stories there, but was the first time I had to do a pat down. And I had to strip search somebody. So that right there is like, you know, to me that was, I was a kid. I was like 22, 23 years old, and I had to do that. That's like being very, very evasive with somebody. But after customs, I turned around and transitioned over to the U.S. Department of Labor, Wage and Hour, because if you get a federal job, once you go ahead and do your probationary period, you can turn around and move from one agency to another. They let you do that. And when I was working with customs, it was the beeper and all of this other stuff. So, you know, I needed to get more a 9-to-5 type of job. What I would like to go ahead and do is kind of, I noticed that in your publication, in your weekly publication, there was a quote. It says, "The labor movement was the principal force that transformed misery and despair into hope and progress. Martin Luther King Jr." I don't know if that quote was put in there because February is Black Heritage Month, or if it was just a segue about what I'm going to be talking about. All right. Today, what I'm going to focus on is, as you see on your agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Department of Labor and give you some information about immigrants versus non-immigrants, and a lot of information regarding worker rights. Okay? Can we put the projectors in on? Okay. That right there is my contact information, and as indicated, you know, you're more than welcome to go ahead and give me a call. Second, go ahead, Laura. That right there is very, very small, but what it translates is a disclaimer that you have to put on your PowerPoint. And basically what it says is that I'm just talking to you today, giving you my expertise, giving to you my story. And I'm saying that I'm not an attorney. And if you have any, you know, if I give you information, whatever, that's your decision, whatever it is that you want to do. I'm just doing a presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, we are going to go ahead and talk about the Fair Labor Standards Act. Let me ask this. Does anybody know here what law requires an employer to pay you minimum wage and overtime? Does anybody know? Okay. You work, is my soda right? I'm sorry. Sorry about this, folks. Thank you. You work your whole life and you say, I'm supposed to be paid at least a minimum wage, and I'm supposed to be paid overtime, and normally everybody will say, I'm supposed to be paid overtime after 40 hours in a week. But let's say your employer doesn't do that, all right? The question is, do you know what to do about that? Do you know where to go make a complaint? Do you have any rights to recoup that money? And if so, how long? Can you continue working for that employer, and then how long after that can you turn around and come back and make a complaint, and then they can make your back wage liability retroactive? All right? That's what I'm here to go ahead and talk to you and inform you. That law is called the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Fair Labor Standards Act was in 1938. It was during the Depression, and what they wanted to do is, back before 1938, they would work people in the shops and so on for over 40 hours, and they would not give him any benefits, they would not give him anything. That is where Martin Luther King's quote comes into play, because he was talking about the labor movement. The labor movement talks about organization of a union and the union turning around and giving worker rights. That's why in some states you have the right to go ahead and take a break after X amount of hours. You have the right to receive overtime when you work over 40 hours. All of these are privileges that have been given to the workforce through organized labor, through basically the labor movement. It wasn't just there that somebody just woke up and did it. So in 1938, they decided to go ahead and penalize the employer. Overtime is a penalty to the employer, okay? And they say that to penalize the employer, if you're gonna work Johnny over 40 hours a week, you're gonna have to pay him a halftime premium of his hourly rate as a penalty. Because the employers, they didn't wanna go out, and even now today, they don't wanna go out and hire new employees. They would rather pay that penalty rather than go out and hire. You saying yeah, right? Yeah. So they do that because when they hire a new employee, there is so much behind the curtain that a lot of people don't know, okay? For example, they hire you, then they're gonna have to pay more workman's compensation, okay? They're gonna have to pay more taxes. There's a lot of liability into having an employee. So they will rather go ahead and work somebody over 40 hours and just pay them the halftime premium and not have to pay that additional expense. The thing about it is that the Fair Labor Standards Act is a federal regulation. It's not state, it's federal, okay? And it sets a minimum wage. And the minimum wage is currently right now $7.25, okay? So it is way, way outdated. All right, the next law that I'm going to talk about is the Family Medical Leave Act. A lot of people, you know, you take care of your parents, your kids get sick, your wife is pregnant, all right? She has to be on bed rest, or you have an ailment. All of a sudden, there's that fear that if you go to your employer and you say, hey, you know what, I need some time off because I need to take care of this serious healthcare condition, whether it's you or your family members, or they even have a military provision now. Say somebody comes back from the military, you have to take care of them, all right? The Family Medical Leave will give you 12 weeks of unpaid leave. Keyword, unpaid leave. There are some companies out there that are more generous, that they will compensate you for that time. But the Family Medical Leave is designed for this and this alone, so that you can take the time off to take care of whatever it is that you need to take care of without the fear of losing your job. They cannot discipline you. They cannot go ahead and move you from whatever position you were before. And when you're ready to come back, they have to put you in an equivalent position. All right? They cannot demote you. They cannot do anything to you in any way, shape, or form. So that's the Family Medical Leave Act. With these acts, each one of them is a different act, okay? And each one of them has different criteria for coverage. All right? It's just like, for example, the Family Medical Leave, you have to have at least 50 employees in your company in order to go ahead and have to, by law, offer the family medical leave to your employees. So if you're working for a very small company, a restaurant or something like that has 20, 25 employees, FMLA, you're not going to get it because, yes ma'am?
Is it full-time employees?
It's the equivalent of full-time employees, yes. So you could have part-time employees and so on. So basically, you take 50 employees, multiply that by 40, that gives you the hours, and then all the employees. And it's, you have to have that 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius. The point I'm trying to get here is that each one of these laws turns around and they have its own criteria, okay? The next law that I would like to go ahead and point out, again, there's a lot of laws that were enforced by the Department of Labor, is the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act. that really doesn't qualify here, okay, because in essence, what will happen is that's more down around the Boot Hill of Missouri, watermelons, tomatoes, and so forth, right? But believe it or not, there are some, basically, landscaping, where they do the gardening, they grow the trees. There's a lot in Winsville of these type of, industry.
Stark
and-
trees in Louisiana.
Excuse me, ma'am?
Stark trees in Louisiana.
Uh-huh, start, yes. And they have, what it is that what this act does, it says that if you are hiring someone to take care of cultivating, harvesting, and growing trees, flowers, anything having to do with agriculture, all right, it gives those individuals, protection. Like, for example, that they have to have a porta pot out in the field, that they have to have a place where they can go ahead and wash their hands. Because remember, like, these people are always working with pesticides. If they get that pesticides in their hands and they have to go to the bathroom, all right, especially if you're men, all right, I'm not trying to be sexist here, but, I have encountered various situations when the males had gotten infections because they used their hands and they were not sanitized. They had that, the fertilizer and so on their hands since they were working, cultivating and everything. So this law is basically does a lot of protection for migrant workers. And that again talks about transportation, field sanitation, and so on. Next slide. Okay. The Fair Labor Standards Act, we already talked about that. It covers minimum wage. We said it was $7.25 for federal. Does anybody here know what the current state of Missouri minimum wage is?
$12.
Yes.
I say I thought it was $11.75, right?
No. Who said 12? Yes, $12. It went up the beginning of this year. Okay? So here's a $50 million question. Let's say that you were paid $12 an hour, and you worked over 40 hours in that work week, okay? The question is, how much does the employer owe you for the overtime hour? Let's say you work 1 hour of overtime. How much would that employer owe you?
$3.60.
How much?
$3.60? For the 1 hour, you mean?
For the 1 hour.
$18. Time and a half.
Time and a half, $18, correct. The thing here is going to be that, unfortunately, all right, if you were to, let's say that employer did not pay you, you call the U.S. Department of Labor, believe it or not, they will not enforce a $12 hourly rate, okay? Because that's a federal law, and the federal law is $7.25, all right? So your best bet is to contact each state. Each state has their own Department of Labor. In Missouri, all right, it's Missouri Department of Industrial Relations. They're in Jefferson City, and that's who you would want to go and do a complaint. So I just wanted to get that point across there. Okay, there is record keeping for the employer under the Fair Labor Standards Act, and there's child labor provisions. The number one thing that the Department of Labor was always worried about is child labor. Minors working under the age of 18, and especially if they were involved in any of the 17 hazardous occupations. And that is on the website what those hazardous occupations are. Next slide, please. Okay, here it shows the variance of, did you go one or two? Go back? Oh, no, that's right, I'm sorry. Here it shows the variance of the minimum wage, federal $7.25, Missouri is 12, and Illinois is 13 right now, the minimum wage. With that said, in the state, whether it be Missouri or Illinois, because it's higher, all right, if anybody's working in a tipped occupation, then that means that you should be getting more money as well, all right? And that's the tip occupation is kind of very difficult, but if anybody has any questions on that or whatever, feel free to give me a call, and I would explain that. Next slide, please. These ones I'll just go ahead and, they're just basically up there. They're talking about what other acts were enforced. The Service Contract Act that talks about employees engaged in working in federal buildings, like the Robert A. Young building and so on. Not City Hall or anything like that. Federal, where the federal monies are, that's called the Service Contract Act. The next one was basically an overtime act for anybody working on contracts, and the Davis-Bacon that talks about construction, laborers and mechanics engaged in working on federal contracts. So if you know of anybody that belongs to a union, right now the government has passed what's called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. All the people have heard about, oh yeah, you know what? The government is going to do something about building our roads because our bridges are terrible and everything. So all these companies are out there bidding to go ahead and get those jobs. So you might go ahead, you might know somebody that's in the construction business and so on. The U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division would be the one that would take care of that because that's federal monies. Okay, next slide, please. The next slide is basically, those are just some other acts, and I don't want to really go into that. That talks about Immigrants and Naturalization Act. I do want to point out on that because it is known that in this area there's a lot of people, I don't know if you've encountered, where non-immigrants will come into Missouri like around April or so, and these are your landscapers that turn around and work here temporarily, and then they go back to their country. That's not necessarily just Mexico, it's any foreign country. And it is what's called the H-2B visa, and they're here temporarily. The Department of Labor used to, I used to enforce that. I'm retired now, but. All right, the next slide, please. On this slide, I just would like to educate you a little bit about this here. Talks about what is considered to be an immigrant, okay? And it talks about what is a non-immigrant versus an immigrant, all right? And what makes it different. Individuals that are basically on this flow chart, if they are a citizen of the United States, okay? Let's say, like I said to you, that my parents, they came into the United States, they came in from Mexico, they were living here in the United States, and most of you have probably heard the phrase green card holders. Those are people that come here and they have permanent residency, but they're not a citizen of the United States, okay? They just have permanent residency. They have the privilege of living in the United States. But if somebody comes in and they decide to become naturalized citizen in that type of a situation, now in that case, they would be a citizen of the United States, okay? Anybody that was born in the United States is automatically a citizen of the United States. But for the green card holders would be this side over here. For the individuals that are citizens of the United States, and they are basically, the non-green card holders are here. These are those H-2B individuals that came in to work landscaping and so on. Individuals that work on farms, picking watermelons and so on, that they go back to their native land at the end of the contract. These individuals would be called non-immigrants. The individuals that are green card holders that turn around and live, in the United States and so on, then basically, I'm looking at this chart right now, okay? Permanent residents, I got this backwards, I'm sorry people. Permanent residents, individuals that are aliens but permanent residents, these would be your green card holders right here. They are non-immigrants. And then these individuals over here are your immigrants. what I'm trying to show there is that a lot of people, especially let's say hypothetically with the Hispanic culture, okay, they don't know how to address them. You know, slang language that I used to hear in Chicago, I'm pretty sure, I mean, not so much now. They'll say, oh yeah, you know, they're an alien. Or they'll say, you know, they'll even use a derogatory expression such as, oh, they're a wetback. They're not here legally in the United States and so on. So basically, there is correct terminology to utilize. And in essence, that's what I'm trying to point out to you, that there is a difference between an immigrant and a non-immigrant in the United States. The next slide, please. All right. Legal immigrants and undocumented immigrants. Why is this important? All right. An immigrant, a person that comes to live here permanently in the United States. All right. And there's a lot of controversy. There was a lot of controversy about that because if you will remember a couple years ago, or not too long ago, there was that word dreamers that people were bringing, that they brought their kids when they were little into the United States, and they came in here and they were not legal. To live in the United States, these people were undocumented. So in essence, their children grew up. One thing that I found out that I did not know, and that surprised me, was that in the United States, you know, kids can go to school up through high school, all right? But, and I don't know if this has changed or not, because I'm not in the education industry, but at one point, once that child, that dreamer, graduated from high school, they could not go to college. All right, that was the end of it. So that means that they could not become productive. They could not go ahead and turn around and enter into a profession. But now, let's say, you know, they went ahead and changed that for a while there, and they said, yeah, you know, this dreamer can go to college. But now the next problem that they were facing is that once that dreamer graduated from college, let's say that they went into computer science or something like that, guess what? They could not get hired because they were still undocumented. So it's like, well, why even go ahead and give an exemption on that if, by the, you know, and I'm going to spend all these thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get a degree, and by the end of my education, I will not be able to work. That is the case in Missouri. In Missouri, if you're an employer, all right, one of the things is they have that I-9 program, I-9 verification program, which says you're going to go ahead, if you are thinking about hiring somebody, you need to go ahead and turn around and ensure that this individual is going to be employed legally in the state of Missouri. Because we, you know, as an employer, you cannot hire someone that is undocumented. Keyword, knowingly. There's always somewhere around there, because see, you think about this, all right? There's so many undocumented workers in the United States. The question here is going to be, how are they working? Where are they getting their money? You know? So that tells you right there that there's a lot of them that are in the workforce, that are working, that are paying their taxes, okay? But yet then, they can't have any of the benefits. Because in essence, they cannot file for unemployment. They cannot turn around and file for a lot of the benefits that are given to individuals who are legally employed in the United States. And if the Immigration Naturalization Service were to ever audit your business, if you were an employer and so on, then in essence what would happen is that you would get a hefty penalty for hiring undocumented workers. So, the next slide, please. Next one, please. Okay, this one talks about deferred action for childhood arrivals. Other words, DECA. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to your point you just were making about an employer and an undocumented worker paying taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean they have a social security number and they've been paying social security?
Thank you very much for that question. I'm going to address that.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. No problem. Some of you might heard the word DECA. which basically means a deferred program. It was a deferred program allowing individuals a period of amnesty. If they knowingly came into the United States undocumented, the government was giving them like a blanket period in which they could go ahead and turn around and petition to go ahead and become, basically an individual with legal rights in the United States, have their work permit, and become naturalized if that's what they wanted to do. A friend of mine just told me that he turned around and he was so happy because he just became naturalized. And I recall the day that I went with my mother because she became naturalized. Now, I'll tell you a funny story. I have no clue how in the world this woman became naturalized because all she spoke was Spanish. But she did. You know, she passed the test and she naturalized, and that was such a great relief. What people don't know is this: when you become naturalized, here's the thing: do you have the right as any other U.S. born individual in this country? And the answer is no. Okay? Basically, you could still be deported even though you become a naturalized citizen, because if you break, say for example, the Immigration Naturalization Service, after you got your document, you swore in and everything, and they found out that you falsified any information during the process of that naturalization service, they can revoke it and they can deport you. Can they deport you if you're born here in the United States? Absolutely not. You can do whatever you want to. The thing about it is this, all right, when you see individuals that say to you, I became naturalized in the United States, all right, these individuals chose to go ahead and turn around and leave their allegiance to whatever country it is that they're coming from. They chose to go ahead and become a citizen of the United States, and they chose to defend this great nation. These are all choices, which some people, just because they're born here, they take for granted. Okay? So, to me, being born in the United States should be treasured, because you're given that privilege automatically just because you were born here. But on the same token, you need to respect foreigners, because they are turning around and trying to do everything that they can to go ahead and try to do things the right way. All right, so the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the impact of COVID, post-COVID, in the work industry. All right, and here there is an increase in temporary work. Right now, they say that there's a job shortage, or that they cannot get enough employees, and all these companies are offering $500, to come in and work for me, and so on. And they cannot get their workers to come back to work, because in the workforce, statistically, it's been proven that a lot of people have decided to become entrepreneurs. They decided to go ahead and be the man. I don't want to work for the man. I'm going to be the man. Okay? And that's the way that it is right now. But when you do that, okay, there is a lot of liability. There's a lot of complications that can happen. And as a consumer, all right, let's say you folks, all right, there's a lot of things that you're going to have to be extremely careful about if you hire anybody that has their own business. You need to become very sharp at what it is that you need to ask. For example, a lot of individuals went into the construction business. Let's take the construction business as just for purpose of discussion. All right? Johnny decides to start his own construction business. He calls it ABC LLC. And Johnny is in the builds retaining walls. You, as a resident, decide to hire Johnny to go ahead. Now, Johnny has a workforce of all Hispanic workers. All right? And in essence, what happens is now that he decides that he's not going to pay his Hispanic workers. Can those Hispanic workers come back and sue you and put a lien against your house? And the answer is yes. Okay? Because you need to know you say, well, I'm not in a small business arena, so why do I care about learning anything about it? You need to learn about it because you need to know what documentation, what things you need to ask for of that contractor before you give them a job. For example, do you know that in the state of Missouri, that if you own a construction business, okay, and I believe if you have more than 2 employees, you have to have workman's comp insurance, okay? I'll tell you about a personal thing that happened to me. I hired a construction worker, and this is before I knew all of this, to go ahead and put siding in my house. He could turn around and told me that he was going to go to lunch with his workers. 3 hours later, they showed back up. I could smell that alcohol in him. And he's operating, one of those skill saws to go ahead and cut the vinyl, whatever the case may be. I had to go ahead and kick him out of my property. Because what would happen if they got injured on my property? The thing that I'm saying is because in the industry, all right, entrepreneurship is a big thing right now. However, that does not guarantee that they're doing everything correctly. Yes, ma'am.
Are the Amish people, workers exempt from that?
Yes, there are. Let me rephrase that, okay? I know that there are special provisions for the Amish community. As to what exactly those are at this particular point, I don't know what they are. But I do know that there is exceptions for them, okay? Any other questions? All right. So, yes, ma'am.
Are you saying like you're in a subdivision,
Mhm.
you have a homeowners association, and that association hires landscapers to come in, hard to find those workers, by the way, and if those workers come in and they're doing landscaping and they're hurt on your,
Oh, you're liable.
that's
Not
interesting.
the association, not the homeowners association?
The homeowners, well, here's the situation, okay? I'm not, like I said, I'm not an attorney.
Right,
I know homeowners associations have contracts. It's contingent on the contract. I will say this to you. If you own a homeowners association or you're just a resident, all right, before you go ahead and sign on the dotted line, make sure that you talk to somebody that's an expert and can guide you and tell you. Don't just do it and say, well, this person is in business, so I'm pretty sure that this person is compliant. They have their unemployment, they pay the wages to their employees, so forth, and so on. Don't put yourself in that vulnerable position. What I'm saying to you is that right now the potential of something like that happening is very high because a lot of people have gone into becoming entrepreneurs. So please be aware. All right. So then the thing is that, there is a lot of independent contractors. Next slide, please. All right. So we're talking about being an independent contractor. It promotes wage inequality. There is not equal. The equality is not equal because let's say that you own rightfully a construction company for 20 years, and now all of these people decide that they want to start their own LLCs and so on. Understand something. Here you are, an employer, and you have your own employees. You've been doing everything by the law. You're paying for their unemployment. You're paying your quarterly taxes. You're paying everything that you have to for that employee. And then here comes Johnny, all right? And Johnny says to you, this guy says over here, I can build that retaining wall for you for $2,000. And Johnny comes over here and says, I can do it for you for $800. All right? Very, very tempting. But see, that's a decision that you have to make. All right? But the thing is that that's where the wage inequality kicks in. Because now Johnny has, underbidded this guy. But now, who's to say that Johnny, his crew is, let's say, all individuals that are not legally working in the United States, and now Johnny decides not to pay them, all right? You're turning around and putting yourself in that type of a situation. This is for any type of business, okay? So just think about what you're doing. Think about, what it is that you want to do, and not penalize individuals that are doing their business correctly from the go. All right. Hiring undocumented immigrants, we already talked about that. We talked about that they're not allowed here in the state of Missouri. They don't have, the rights that individuals who do either have a work permit or who have authority to work in the United States. Next slide, please. All right, employer. What's an employer? An employer basically is someone who, now keep in mind this, okay? This is very important, especially if you're still in the workforce. Who's your employer? Is your immediate supervisor your employer?
No,
Wrong.
only if he, I thought if he owns the company, yeah.
No. An employer, by definition, is anybody who either, keyword, directly or indirectly turns around and basically controls what it is that you do, is directly or indirectly, if they do it day to day. Okay? So your supervisor is indirectly your employer. He might not be your boss, but he is your employer because he's telling you what to do. So that supervisor works directly under the employer, but that supervisor tells you what to do. That supervisor can turn around and write you up. That supervisor can turn around and fire you, and so on. So technically, by definition of the law, he is your employer. Yes?
Is that so that if my supervisor tells me to do something that is nebulous or illegal, that it is the same as the company?
Yes, he represents the company. Correct. And the rule of thumb in a situation like that would be that if you're ever in question, unless they're telling you to kill somebody or do a big felony or whatever, do it and then refute it. All right? Because if you don't do it, then they'll get you for insubordination. They could probably fire you. So if you belong to a union, do it and then go ahead and grieve it. But then do not turn around and say no. Okay? Document, document, document. Just like they're doing it, you can do it too. Okay, next slide, please. On this slide here is a contrast about what is an employer and what's an independent contractor. And basically, it has to do, very easy, control. Okay? Do know this, and probably you would not have known this. A lot of people say, well, an independent contractor, there's a 20-prong test. There is a 20-prong test, okay, that from the IRS, and it's called a common law test, okay? But under the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division, there's only 6 prongs. So that means that more likely, all right, if an individual controls what time you come and go, they tell you what to do, they turn around, and you exclusively just, even though you are an independent contractor, but you exclusively just work for one client, all right, then your economic reality is you're working for that one person, and that person can turn around and technically you could be their employee. The problem with that comes in that because of COVID, what a lot of people, they started working from home and everything. So now when they start coming back into the workforce, somebody had the great brain idea that, hey, you know what, I'll bring you back to work for my company like you were working before, no problem and anything, for the exception that now you're an independent contractor. Okay? And that does happen. They might offer it to you. The thing is that if you are an independent, we're working, doing widgets, and they bring you back doing widgets, okay, they can't do that. I was just talking to Lori here about, I don't know if you guys heard about Chick-a-Peel or whatever. Is that Chick-a-Peel?
Chick-fil-A?
Chick-fil-A, yeah. That the guy had a workforce shortage, all right? And he offered the people free chicken. Come and volunteer and work for me and I'll give you free chicken. Of course, no, that's not allowed, okay? But that's just comical. I'm just going real quickly through these slides and everything, and I do want to say to you that I am going to go ahead and share this with the Ethical Society, so it will be made available to you, and the rationale behind that is because next slide please, go to the next 2 slides again, go to the next one please. anywhere where you see, when you get the slides, these things that are in red will be in light blue and they'll have a link to them. So you can go into the presentation, hit on that link, and you'll be right there and get the information. You don't have to go around looking for it. So if there's anything that interests you, then by all means. On that slide right there, it talks about new hire process, what the employer has to do. It talks about the I-9s, giving you a W-4, and so on. I'm just putting that out there in case you ever decided and wanting to find out about that type of information, but also to show you that there is specific requirements that an employer has to do. They just can't go out and hire anybody. They have to go ahead and follow these steps. Next one, please. All right. On this one here, it is very important, and again, what it does, there are the links to it, but I want to show you that there are 3 different places that complaints can be filed, okay? If you have a federal complaint, and you can go ahead and call the U.S. Department of Labor, all right? They have their own complaint system, their own complaint form. Now keep in mind, remember I told you about the Family Medical Leave Act and so on? That's who you would call, okay? Because that's a federal law. This one is for the Illinois Department of Labor, and the one on the bottom is the Missouri Department of Industrial Relations. Again, the links are going to be there. You click on the link. If for some reason you were unfortunate enough that you had to file a complaint, just hit on that link. It'll kick up the form, and it'll tell you the complaint procedure, what it is that you need to do. Next slide, please. On the next few slides here, I'm just going to hit and giving the very detailed information of each one of these agencies so that you don't have to wait around on an answer machine. You got the phone number there, you got the email, and you even have the name of the district director for that agency. And these are all the information. Next slide, please. Keep on going. And I give it for the federal, for Illinois, and for Missouri. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. On this one here is the answer to your question now. Okay. If an undocumented worker is working, all right, and they receive a paycheck, by law, the employer has to make deductions for Social Security, Medicare, state and federal taxes. Where does that money go? Where does it go? Once upon a time, that money was just kept by the state, because if you don't have a number to claim those taxes back, then you're not going to get that money back. About 10, 12 years ago, they started going ahead and promoting what's called an I-10, okay? An I-10 number. An I-10 number comes like a card, all right? But it's not a Social Security card. Your Social Security card is issued to you by the Social Security Administration. The I-10 is issued by the Internal Revenue Service. And the two shall never meet, okay? The I-10 is there because it gives you, or an individual, will give an individual a specific number that they can file and fill out their income tax returns and get that money back. Just like us, okay? That's what that I-10 number does. But, does that I-10, next slide please, can that I-10 be utilized to get the services that individuals like your Social Security benefits and so on, or any type of things of that nature? And the answer is no. But what can it do? Well, it can establish that I-10, you can use it to establish proof of residency. And they came up with it because, if you will remember, when they were doing all those exceptions and everything to the immigration program, they were saying, okay, you know what? If you came illegally into the United States and you've been here 30, 40 years, okay, with your I-10, you can prove that you've been here that long because you've been, filing your income tax and so on. All right, you can get a driver's license with that as well. All right, You can get a business loan, you can open up a bank account, and you can obtain a mortgage so you can buy a house. So, do you have undocumented workers that own homes? Yes. Why? Because chances are they probably use their ITIN to go ahead and do the financing for that. Banks right now, U.S. Bank, a lot of these banks are turning around and catering to undocumented workers. And they're turning around and making sure that they can open up accounts and so on. Next one, please. All right. The thing is, the I-10 is not a work authorization. You are still an undocumented worker. You are still not employed legally. But if you were to be employed, that gives you the right to claim back the taxes that you paid. Okay? But make sure that you know that that is not an authorization. Listen.
So, I don't get it. So, if employers are illegally employing people who are not documented,
Mm-hmm.
but they have documentation that they're illegally employed, how are the employers not getting nailed for that?
I had shown the slide and went briefly through it and said that there's a process for hiring people that employer has to do. One of the biggest one is the I-9. You have to go ahead and the I-9, the individual has to give like 2 forms of proof that they are legal to be hired in the United States and so on. Well, you have heard of purchasing a Social Security card, false, documentation. What I had heard personally myself, employers say is that I-9 says that I looked at the documentation. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what, I'm not an expert. How do I know what they gave me?
The employer is saying plausibly, we didn't know he was, okay.
Remember I used the word knowingly before?
Yes.
That's their defense. I didn't know, okay? But still, Johnny has been working for the same employer for over 3 years and paying his taxes because the employer cannot say, I did not know that, I did not have to go ahead and make deductions for federal taxes,
Right.
okay? So he thinks everything is kosher. So does that happen? Yes, it does. Now the next slide, please. So this is, next one, please. Yeah. This one is very important. It's a Supreme Court case called the Hoffman Plastics. And that one says this: if you are an employee and you are undocumented and you do not have a work authorization and you work for an employer, whether the employer says I didn't know, whatever, and this I heard a lot during my investigations. I would go in and the employer says, oh yeah, I fired him. Well, you owe him his wages. I don't have to pay him. He's undocumented. He's not authorized to work in the United States. I don't have to pay him. Wrong. You have to pay him. The Hoffman Plastics says if you worked, you still have to pay. It doesn't matter whether you're here legally or not in the United States. But the Hoffman Plastics does not say if you're here undocumented, the employer still has to give you work. It doesn't say that. It just says if you worked, you have to. Next one, please. All right. Pretty much the next few slides is just wrapping up. Okay. It just basically talks about immigration. We talked about that. I do give a publication there if you wanted to read a little bit about immigrants in the workforce. Next one, please. This one here talks about, updates regarding the Department of Homeland Security. The next one. This one here talks about how many basically individuals are trying to come into the country, and how much they have year to date. And this was 2002 figures. They had over 100,000 people trying to come in. Some of you might have already heard, next slide, that around Texas and everything, they don't even know where to house them right now. And, get out of the mentality that everybody is Hispanic, because not everybody is Hispanic. They're coming through the southern border, but it doesn't mean that everybody is Hispanic and so on. Next one. This one shows individuals trying to go ahead and cross the border. I work down in the border, and that did happen all the time. Okay, in conclusion, keep on going on the slide slow. Thank you. In conclusion, again, my name is Sonia Granados. My company, what I do is for you people, what you would be probably using me for would be for advice, okay? Like if you had a work problem, a labor issue, that's what I would do. For other companies and so on, I perform audits, make sure that they're in compliance with the regulations for both the state and the federal, all right? And pretty much, like I said, the PowerPoint is going to be there for you. You have my contact information, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just fascinating, yeah.
Well, I wish we had more time. Hopefully, with establishing our new location, keep going back to that. One of the things that we are hoping to have is adult education type platforms and things like that. And we'll definitely keep you in mind for that, because I know there's a lot of great information that you weren't able to get through. I apologize for a short window, but that was fantastic. I forgot to pass the connections basket around, so did anybody have anything? I know, yeah, go ahead.
On behalf of Atheist Alliance of America and Atheist Alliance Helping the Homeless Sailors, I would like to thank Ethical Society for their matching contribution to our warm-up winter, and to all the members who contributed. We really, really appreciate your support.
Also, you know, Jill, there's a card over here on the welcome table for I guess landlord, yeah, the landlord here, thanking her for letting us use the space and the time that she did, and everything else. So if you wanted to sign that, that's there. Other than that, I can't think of anything else. Thank you again, Sonia. It was wonderful. Everybody have a good week.